Donald Trump is back in Iowa, and that alone should make you pause. Safe state, loyal voters, landslide territory? On paper, yes. In reality, this visit feels less like a victory lap and more like a political emergency drill. When a sitting president returns to a place he already won, it usually means something is slipping beneath the surface. Iowa is no longer just a friendly backdrop of cornfields and applause. It is a stress test for a Republican Party staring down a brutal midterm math problem. So here's the real question that should keep you watching. If Trump needs to personally defend Iowa, what does that say about the battles Republicans are quietly losing elsewhere? For years, Iowa was treated like political muscle memory. Republicans did not campaign there with urgency. They assumed it. Donald Trump won it. Republicans held it. The corn was tall, the margins were red, and the map felt predictable. But predictability is exactly what Iowa has quietly lost. Beneath the surface of comfortable Trump victories, the ground has shifted, cracked, and begun to slide in dangerous directions for the Republican Party. Start with the numbers. Because numbers do not lie, they whisper warnings. In Iowa's 3rd Congressional District, Trump won by more than 4 points. Solid, respectable, seemingly safe. Yet the Republican congressman Zach Nunn barely survived, scraping by with a margin under 4 points in a race Democrats now see as unfinished business. In the 1st District, Mariannette Miller-Meeks did even worse, holding onto her seat by just 798 votes, while Trump cruised to an 8-point victory. That gap is not a coincidence. It is a symptom. Trump voters and Republican midterm voters are no longer the same creature. One shows up for spectacle, grievance, identity, and dominance. The other requires motivation, fear, or economic reassurance. Iowa exposes that split with brutal clarity. Trump can still fill rooms. What he cannot guarantee is that those rooms will translate into ballots when his name is not on the ticket. This is why Iowa matters more than it looks. It is not a swing state in the traditional sense, but it has become a swing mechanism. A place where turnout elasticity decides outcomes. Republicans dominate presidential years and sweat through midterms. Democrats lose the top line but hunt relentlessly for congressional weak spots, knowing that frustration, inflation anxiety, healthcare costs, and trade fatigue hit rural and suburban voters harder when the excitement fades. Trade policy has left scars here. Iowa farmers remember tariffs not as theory but as stalled exports and volatile soybean prices. The administration points to new deals with China and the European Union, and the numbers sound impressive. Yet for many producers, volatility lingers longer than press releases. Add rising insurance premiums, stubborn grocery prices, and rural hospital closures, and suddenly Iowa feels less like a fortress and more like a balancing act on a thinning wire. Demographics compound the pressure. Suburban areas around Des Moines are changing, not dramatically, but decisively. College, educated voters, independents, and younger families are less reflexively loyal, more issue-driven, and more sensitive to national chaos bleeding into local races. Democrats do not need to flip Iowa. They only need to destabilize it. That is why Trump's return matters. Iowa is no longer a symbol of strength. It is an early warning system. When a president must physically defend territory he already won, the map is telling a story the slogans cannot hide. The Republican Party is discovering that winning loudly at the top does not protect quietly vulnerable seats below. And Iowa, once predictable, now asks an uncomfortable question that will echo far beyond its borders. If this state is no longer automatic, which one is next? Donald Trump is not a traditional campaign asset. He is not a policy explainer, a coalition builder, or a careful messenger. He is a force multiplier. When he enters a district, turnout changes shape. The Republican Party understands this better than anyone, which is why it keeps reaching for the same tool even as the risks grow sharper. Trump is deployed not to persuade, but to activate. Not to soften edges, but to electrify the base. In midterm politics, that choice can save a seat or detonate it. The math is brutally simple. When Trump appears, his voters show up. When he does not, many of them stay home. Republican strategists have seen this pattern repeatedly. Trump voters treat presidential elections like a cultural event. Midterms feel optional. That gap terrifies party leadership, especially in districts where margins are measured in hundreds of ballots rather than thousands. Trump becomes the lever to pull when fear replaces confidence. The White House strategy leans fully into this reality. Trump is not sent to sell detailed legislation. He is sent to remind voters who they are loyal to. His presence alone reframes the election as tribal rather than transactional. The message is implicit and effective. Voting is no longer about a local representative. It is about defending Trump himself. For core supporters, that motivation works. Passion beats apathy almost every time. But here is the problem. Trump does not only mobilize allies, he also activates opponents. Independents who might otherwise ignore a midterm suddenly pay attention. Suburban voters who tolerate Trump at the top of the ticket recoil when he dominates local races. Every appearance hardens lines. Enthusiasm rises on both sides, which is useful only if the base outnumbers everyone else. In close districts, that assumption becomes dangerous. History offers little comfort. Presidents almost always lose seats in midterms. Power breeds backlash. Trump is trying to defy gravity by leaning harder into the very presence that creates resistance. It is a gamble built on energy rather than expansion. The Republican Party is no longer trying to grow the electorate. It is trying to squeeze maximum turnout from a shrinking circle of reliable believers. This explains the strange choreography. Trump visits districts he already won. He headlines in places that should not need him. His rallies feel celebratory, but the scheduling reveals anxiety. The party is not asking whether Trump helps. It is asking whether survival without him is even possible. That is a far more revealing calculation. There is also a branding cost. Candidates tied closely to Trump inherit his controversies automatically. They lose the ability to run as pragmatic problem solvers. Every local issue becomes national. Healthcare becomes ideology. Trade becomes loyalty. Immigration becomes identity warfare. Trump simplifies the message, but simplification is not always persuasion. Trump as a turnout weapon cuts fast and cuts deep. It energizes, polarizes, and exhausts the middle. Republicans know the blade is sharp. They are using it anyway because the alternative is worse. If Trump stays home and turnout collapses, defeat is guaranteed. If he shows up, victory is possible but volatile. That is the tension driving this midterm strategy. Trump is not the future plan. He is the emergency generator. Loud, powerful, unreliable, and impossible to turn off once activated. The question is not whether he can fire up voters. He always can. The real question is whether the party can survive the blast radius. The White House arrives in Iowa armed with charts, headlines, and victory language. Inflation is down. Wages are up. Growth is accelerating. Energy exports are booming. On paper, it looks like an economic redemption story. On the ground, it feels more like a debate between a spreadsheet and a grocery receipt. Iowa voters live in the space between those two realities, and that gap is where midterm elections are quietly won or lost. Trump's economic message is blunt and confident. Trade deals are back. China is buying soybeans again. Europe is buying American energy. Ethanol is thriving. Billions sound impressive when spoken from a podium. Yet Iowa farmers remember that volatility never announces when it is leaving. The trade war scars did not disappear with new contracts. They taught producers one lesson above all others. Markets can collapse faster than politicians can explain them. Soybean prices recovered, then wobbled. Input costs rose. Equipment loans tightened. Weather uncertainty collided with financial pressure. A good year no longer feels secure. It feels temporary. That emotional reality matters more than macroeconomic graphs. Farmers vote with memory, not optimism. Outside the fields, the pressure multiplies. Health insurance premiums in rural counties continue to climb. Hospital closures force families to drive hours for care. Property taxes rise faster than wages. Grocery prices refuse to return to pre-pandemic comfort. Gasoline dips, then spikes again. The administration says inflation is cooling. Voters ask why their bank accounts still feel overheated. Trump complicates his own case. One day affordability is a crisis caused by elites. The next day housing concerns are dismissed as political theater. That contradiction does not land well in communities where young families cannot buy homes and retirees struggle to downsize. Economic confidence requires consistency. Iowa hears confidence, but it also hears improvisation. Energy policy creates another tension. Ethanol matters here. Renewable fuel standards are not abstract. They shape livelihoods. Trump promotes massive energy exports and domestic dominance, which excites producers, but raises fears about long-term market balance and environmental backlash. Farmers want strength, not whiplash. They want leverage without retaliation. Democrats exploit this discomfort aggressively. They do not challenge the numbers. They challenge the feeling. They ask whether prosperity feels real, whether stability feels permanent, whether chaos elsewhere eventually reaches Iowa. That framing is effective because it does not demand betrayal of Trump. It only demands doubt. This is the midterm danger zone. Economic messages succeed when voters feel improvement personally. When they do not, success sounds theoretical. Trump sells momentum. Iowa demands predictability. Those are different currencies. The Republican bet is that cultural loyalty outweighs economic anxiety. That identity beats irritation. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it fails catastrophically. Iowa sits at that crossroads, nodding at trade winds while counting monthly expenses. This is why Trump's visit matters. He is not just selling policies. He is trying to override lived experience with narrative force. He is betting that confidence can substitute for comfort. That swagger can outpace skepticism. The risk is simple and severe. If voters believe the economy is improving but not improving for them, enthusiasm fades. And in a midterm election, fading enthusiasm is fatal. Iowa is listening carefully, not to applause lines, but to its own balance sheet. Democrats do not need to defeat Donald Trump in Iowa. They only need to keep him in the room. That is the core of their counterattack. And it is deceptively simple. Every Trump visit, every rally, every headline is treated not as a threat but as free ammunition. The strategy is not to argue with his policies. It is to attach his presence permanently to every vulnerable Republican on the ballot. In tight districts, Democrats are no longer running against individuals. They are running against a shadow presidency. Zach Nunn is not framed as a former Air Force officer with local roots. Mariannette Miller-Meeks is not discussed as a doctor or a pragmatic lawmaker. Ashley Hinson is not allowed to exist as a standalone candidate. They are presented as extensions of the White House, spokes in the Trump machine, indistinguishable from its chaos, controversies, and contradictions. The message is relentless and calculated. If voters are unhappy with grocery prices, Trump is responsible. If health insurance costs rise, Trump is responsible. If immigration feels out of control or trade feels unstable, Trump is responsible. Democrats nationalize every local grievance with surgical precision. The goal is saturation, not persuasion. Repetition replaces nuance. Trump's visit to Iowa accelerates this effort. Democrats point to the optics and ask one brutal question. If these Republicans were truly independent voices, why does the president need to rescue them? The implication is devastating. Trump is not supporting strong candidates. He is propping up weak ones. Advertising follows quickly. Footage of Trump rallies runs alongside clips of congressional votes. Subtlety is abandoned. The line is direct. These lawmakers vote with Trump, protect Trump, and answer to Trump. Local problem solving disappears under national branding. In swing suburbs, that association becomes radioactive. Democrats also exploit fatigue. Even voters who once supported Trump do not always want him dominating every election cycle. They want lower prices, stable schools, functioning hospitals, and predictability. Democrats frame Trump as noise-interrupting solutions. The argument is not ideological. It is emotional exhaustion. This approach is especially effective with independents. They do not need to love Democrats. They only need to feel uneasy about constant confrontation. Trump's style, effective for mobilizing loyalists, becomes a liability when voters crave calm. Democrats weaponize that contrast relentlessly. There is also a strategic asymmetry. Republicans must energize their base to survive. Democrats benefit simply from keeping Trump visible. Every appearance sharpens polarization. which historically favors the opposition party in midterms, Trump's strength becomes the accelerant of his allies' vulnerability. Republicans understand the danger but cannot escape it. Distancing themselves from Trump depresses turnout. Embracing him invites attack. Democrats push them toward this no-win choice and then exploit whichever option they take. This is why Iowa matters again, not as a battleground state, but as a messaging laboratory. Democrats test how effectively Trump can be used as a universal symbol of instability. Early signs suggest the formula works. Trump believes visibility equals dominance. Democrats believe visibility equals accountability. Midterms will decide which interpretation prevails. In Iowa, Democrats are betting that voters will not punish Trump directly, but they will punish those standing next to him when the bill comes due. At this point, the Republican strategy is no longer subtle. It is total commitment. All chips are pushed to the center of the table, and the face on every one of them is Donald Trump. There is no parallel plan, no understudy waiting in the wings, no quiet transition underway. The midterms are being treated as a referendum, not on policy, not on Congress, but on Trump's continued ability to bend political gravity to his will. The risk is enormous because the margin for error is microscopic. The Republican majority in the House hangs by a thread thin enough to snap in a single bad news cycle, lose a handful of seats, and the consequences cascade immediately. Subpoenas return. Investigations multiply, legislative momentum collapses. The final 2 years of the Trump presidency become trench warfare, not governance. Republican leadership knows this. That is why Trump is everywhere. Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Iowa, districts he already won, counties he already dominates, voters who already know his slogans by heart. This is not expansion, it is reinforcement. The party is defending ground that used to defend itself. Trump's dilemma is structural. If he steps back, turnout collapses. His supporters do not merely prefer him, they orbit him. Remove the gravitational center and the system destabilizes. But if he steps forward, he nationalizes every race. Every school board contest feels like a proxy war. Every House seat becomes a judgment on his temperament, his controversies, his priorities. There is no safe setting on this dial. Trump can lower the volume, but he cannot change the frequency. His presence transforms campaigns instantly. Candidates lose oxygen, nuance evaporates, everything becomes loyalty or betrayal. That environment rewards passion and punishes moderation. This gamble exposes a deeper truth about the modern Republican Party. It has not replaced Trump because it has not learned how. He is not simply a leader. He is the infrastructure, fundraising, turnout, media attention, narrative control, all flow through him. Betting against him feels suicidal. Betting entirely on him feels reckless. The party has chosen recklessness because it offers at least a chance. Iowa crystallizes this reality. If Trump cannot protect fragile seats there, a state that still largely embraces him, the strategy collapses everywhere else. If he succeeds, Republicans will declare vindication and double down. There is no middle outcome, only reinforcement or rupture. This is why the midterms feel so volatile. They are not a routine electoral checkpoint. They are a stress test of a political personality as a governing system. Trump believes intensity beats structure. Democrats believe exhaustion beats intensity. Voters will decide which theory survives contact with reality. The final irony is brutal. Trump's greatest strength remains his ability to command attention. His greatest weakness is that attention has a cost. Every appearance energizes supporters and hardens opposition. Every rally expands loyalty and deepens resistance. The Republican Party has made its choice. It is not running from Trump, it is running through him. The question that lingers far beyond Iowa is whether this all-in bet delivers survival or exposes the moment when the House finally runs out of cards.